A while back, I made a video on how the gym quells we see at the end of Gundam 0083 have some very distinct differences from the gym quells that we're all familiar with. So, in that video, I came up with two possibilities. Either there was an animation mistake, or the gym quells that we saw on screen were meant as an early production version of the gym quell that we all know and love. And whether it was an animation mistake or not, Advance of Zeta has now officially adopted the design in their latest update, along with some other cool tidbits that we'll go over in this video. The gym quell first came to be as a development of the gym custom, the strongest gym of its time. But a unit that was unfortunately not widely adopted because it didn't have any particular selling point. You know, other than the fact that it was the perfect ace pilot machine. Something that the forming members of the Titans fortunately did pick up on and chose this machine as a base for their main unit. Something that first resulted in the Gym Quell early production version, or the Gym Quell early type as I'll be calling it. We can already see some of the defining features of the Gym Quell in this machine, like the new shoulders, the extra sensor on the chest, a differently shaped cockpit hatch, and the new forehead. But in other areas, it was still closer to the gym custom than the finalized gym quell. The legs remained unchanged, ironically giving it a better thruster placement, and it lacked one of the defining features that the gym quell was named after. It didn't yet have the sensor on the bottom of the legs to better quell uprisings. On the face then, we get an interesting mix between the side vents of the custom, the new gym quell's forehead, and a very standard gym-esque faceplate. The one thing that would later revert back to the gym custom spec. The final big difference then is the arms. According to the description, they're identical to those of the gym custom. But if you look closely, both in the new Advance of Zeta art and in the 0083 screenshot, they actually appear to be closer to those of the Gym Kai. But whether you go with the visuals or the description, the important thing remains the same. This early version did not yet have the prototype movable frame. As soon as Operation Stardust came to a close then, the Titans were founded, and these early types were distributed to their first operational squadrons. Amongst them, the Al Giza, who was crewed mostly by ex-Albion members. It is also highly likely that not a lot of these machines were pushed into service, and that those who did would soon be upgraded to regular gym quells. And talking about upgrades, there would still be one more round of upgrades for the standard gym quell. Its cockpit would be replaced with a panoramic monitor and a linear seat, and its reactor was upgraded. One rarely seen add-on then was the Chobham armor. That is commonly associated with the Alex or the Hazel series. The one big issue that came up during the testing of this armor with the Alex was the added weight, and as a consequence, the lowered mobility because of it. However, this armor would then be dusted off by the Titans test team, and they would do two things to mitigate the loss of mobility. First of all, they would typically only equip it to their units with enough thrust, like the Hazel 2 with the tri-booster unit or the double booster unit. And secondly, they would only equip the torso and skirt armor to lower the extra weight as much as possible. And while the Gym Quell would just have its normal backpack, the weight of the torso and skirt was deemed acceptable in certain circumstances. Even though it offered little extra protection against beam weaponry, another one of the Gym Quell's main goals was hunting down Zeon remnants. And while they could have beam-equipped Gelgoogs, they would mostly be using units with solid rounds like Zaku's and Doms. Exactly the kinds of enemies that Chobham armor was made for. And for our next machine, we have to go back to when the Titans were formed. Even though they had some squadrons ready to go with the Gym Quell early type, they didn't have enough to give them out to all of their forces. So to get around this, some gym customs were painted in the signature Titans color scheme and pushed into service by them. This would only be a temporary solution though, because after 2 months, the Titans had already been able to produce enough Gym Quells for all of their troops, and the Gym Customs were probably replaced as soon as Gym Quells arrived. As a result, only a limited amount of these Gym Customs ever saw action. However, if École du Ciel is anything to go by, it seems that some squadrons opted to keep their Gym Customs as long as possible. Either because they were used to them, or because they felt that due to some of the changes, the Gym Custom had an edge over the Quel in areas that they found important. Or the author thought that the Gym Custom looked better than the Gym Quel, and therefore used the Gym Customs design for the Gym Quel. Finally then, let's have a look at the fate of some of the Gym Quells, because those machines were the main poster boys for this influx of Gym Quell information. The Gym Quell ReZeon version. A gym that sometimes goes by its normal model number, like here, or ARZ-79GQ. Basically, after the Grips War, a certain faction of the Titans, called the Tristan faction, decided to desert to Mars and join ReZeon rather than surrender to the Federation. And amongst their ranks were still some Gym Quells that were then repainted, restickered, and pushed into service. Quite the ironic end for a mobile suit that is literally all about Earth supremacy. It was a refined version of the best gym of the time, it was used by the Titans, and it was literally named Quel to quell rebellions and Zeon remnants. And then one really last thing, because I don't think I'll ever get an opportunity again to talk about it otherwise, the long rifle. I think this weapon was made specifically for the Master Grade Gym Type C space type, and it almost never makes an appearance anywhere. And yet, it is such a cool design. It's been one of my favorite Federation weapons ever since I got the Master Grade, so I was so happy to see the Gym Quell early type using it. This weapon desperately needs some more recognition, and I would kill to have a high grade version of it. But that has been all for this somewhat development history of the Gym Quell early type. A machine that I'm very happy has now become part of the official canon, and also a machine that I'm very happy to now have a better look at. Because in 0083, you don't really get a good look at the face, which you definitely do in this image, and it looks amazing with that new faceplate. Now the question just remains, will this thing ever be made into a P Bandai model kit? But anyways, a big thank you to the Patreon supporters. I hope everyone watching has a great day, and I'll see you all next time.